All right, folks. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're here at CDW. We're here with our good partner Okta. We're here to present to you today on the identity and access management with our partner Okta, and of course, how CDW can assist you on your identity and access management journey. So my name is David Azard. I am the senior manager, executive tech strategy here at CDW. Responsible for bringing new services, both managed and professional services, to our customers. And I will be serve as the moderator for this discussion today. We have with us Areez, and I'm just going to, Areez, turn it over to you just to give you a brief introduction yourself there.
Sure, thanks. Appreciate being here and helping CDW. My name is Areez Mtula. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Okta. I've had over 10 years, close to 15 now, with experience as a professional service engineer, as well as in the sales side, supporting numerous organizations and vendors in the cybersecurity space. Several certifications in SaaS cloud solutions. Well-versed in not only IAM products, but as well as privileged access management products across the board in the industry. And a little personal note, I'm a big fan of hockey, being native to Toronto, and of course, love playing some golf when I get some time in the summertime.
Oh, that was a tremendous introduction. Thank you. Just before, a couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over for Areez to start off the presentation. We've got a lot of content to get through here, folks. Probably going to go right through for the full hour. We will be monitoring questions that are posted in the chat. So if you have questions, please post them. If there's time at the end, we will definitely try to address them. If not, we will certainly answer those questions offline. Everybody who has attended this presentation will get, this webinar will get a copy of this presentation, as well as the questions and the answers for anything that we didn't get time to answer today. Okay. Without further ado, Areez, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick things off from the Okta side of things.
Sounds good. I'm just going to make sure my control works here on your screen. There we go. All right. So for today, the agenda kind of looks like this. So we're going to jump right into the IAM landscape in Canada. We're going to take a look to see what makes up an identity access management landscape, what it involves, what are different areas that we have to take into consideration and be aware of. And then we'll jump into how Okta fits into the IAM model and what services and features that Okta provides that can assist a customer in their journey to not only enhancing their security posture, but making their infrastructure a lot more operationally feasible, but efficient at the same time. I'll close off by kind of talking about our relationship a little bit about AWS, how Okta and AWS are partner and how we are involved, and then some closing remarks about Okta and the industry. And then we'll hand it back over to David to close it off for some CDW security aspects. All right, without further ado, let's there we go. Okay, so we'll talk about first the major identity ecosystem. So when thinking about identity access management, or IAM, there are three main pillars to take into consideration. First and foremost, identity access management. So the identity piece, right? So we have single sign-on. So when we think of single sign-on, we got to think of this is the idea of eliminating the need of multiple credentials and creating that trusted connection, otherwise known as a federated connection between your identity provider and your target application resources or specific resources that use protocols like SAML, OIDC, or even WS Fed or any type of OAuth 2.0 tokens to establish that handshake. We also have multi-factor authentication. So typically these MFAs where certain factors are triggered to verify a user, and then there's policy-driven access as well. So this is kind of taking into account conditional access policies. So if you're looking at a network context or a device context or even a specific location context, right? So this allows you to ensure that the appropriate people have access with the appropriate conditions in place to drive that access. And then there's directory to directory integration. So this commonly is kind of using like a central point of view. Some organizations have one source directory, some organizations have several source directories. So you have an AD, you have maybe a Google GCP or an Office 365 Azure AD hybrid. What this essentially allows you to do in the identity space is to ensure that the right users are sourced from the directory, and then with the identity provider, they can allow a central pane of glass where those users now have access to the appropriate resources. And this also factors in with federation inbound and outbound. So when you think of federation, most commonly users probably or customers would use Office 365 where we have WS federation. So not only can we control access with the identity accessing the tools, but also automating the provisioning and deprovisioning of that user. So inbound and outbound federation, meaning that the appropriate attributes and the appropriate, department or specific attribute strings are taken into consideration, which reflect on the permissions that these users have on these tools. We also have privileged access management as another pillar. Privileged access management, if you think of CyberArk, if you think of Tycotic, you think of Centrify, this is kind of where it comes into play. You can also start thinking about Okta very shortly in Q4, but this is the idea of a vault. And the vaulting your privileged identities or the accounts that have administrative access. So this allows you to now control who has access to those accounts, what they're using them for, and how long are they using them for, right? And when they do use them, what are they using them for? We can understand that through a session or audit recording, and that allows us to get a little bit more of a forensic understanding of what these users are doing with their administrative access. And to enhance the security on that, most privileged access management solutions should have credential rotation. So if I check out an administrative account, perform the actions I need to do my work, and check it back in, the vault will automatically rotate those credentials, ensuring that it is secure and ensuring the next time that a credential is used, it is a different set of password that's actually exposed if it is chosen to be exposed. And I'll be talking about this a little bit more, but this is really significant when you do secure remote access to critical servers via an agent or a connector in your infrastructure. And then we have our third pillar, which is identity governance and administration. So this is to ensure the right users have the right access to the right resources, and they don't have too much administrative access should the privilege be provided. So that is done through periodic user attestation. We ensure that the right users have the right access, and we're reviewing to ensure if they're no longer using that access, we can incorporate a strategy where we can revoke that access. We take into account role-based access controls. So again, once a user is onboarded, their position is identified, and access to specific tools is also identified. And this allows the IGA solution to really incorporate access requests and access certifications based on that user's role. And separation of duty or segregation of duty also comes into play. This is pretty pivotal because say if you do have an access have an access submitted as an administrator to one resource and then you request administrative access to another resource, separation of duty or segregation of duty allows you to understand, okay, if they're accessing this as an administrator, maybe we don't need to give them access to resource A for the time being, and we can automatically revoke that access, minimizing the attack surface, minimizing the risk, and of course, enhancing the security posture automatically. We also have password management. So this is essentially a set of principles and best practices to be followed by users when storing and managing passwords in an efficient manner to secure passwords as much as they can to prevent unauthorized access. And of course, native change detection. This can detect newly created accounts, deleted accounts, even modified accounts. So the changes are detected on aggregation by comparing stored information with newly read information. And if any changes are detected, actions can be taken accordingly to respond to those changes. So this allows you now to have more control on any adjustments made or any changes made to accounts or deleted accounts or maybe adjusted accounts to ensure that the right actions and the right privileges and the right accessibility are adherent to the requirements of those security policies. All right, we'll go on to the next page here. Okay, so and as you can see, in the three pillars, we have quite a bit of competition and a lot of vendors across the board. Again, in identity space, we of course know Okta is the leader. We've acquired Auth0, so we're not only the leader in the workforce, but we're also the leader in the customer identity side. So that's the CIAM side. We also have Microsoft, Ping Identity, and Duo. An IGA, SailPoint is a very common one that most people know, Savvy, and even Secure Ends, IBM, of course. But Okta does have its Okta Identity Governance. So now you can have a unified solution with your identity piece all in one interface. And then, of course, we have our PAM side as well. So CyberArk, Tycotic, BeyondTrust, Centrify. I've worked for these guys, so I'm well versed on how they exercise their business practices and, of course, their solutions. So, Okta does in Q4 will have a privilege access management solution. So now will be the only solution that unifies all three pillars in one interface. But again, it's always important, and I always suggest to customers to evaluate these solutions, make sure they're a good fit for your organization, and address your pain points accordingly. All right, so we have three pillars. What are the overlaps, right? So some call them friction points, and we want to just make sure we have some clarity there. So when it comes to identity and access management and privilege access management, what really it comes down to is the secure access to the infrastructure hosts, right? Now in Okta, it's called advanced server access, but really what that means is, all right, do the right identities have access to the right resources so they can exercise the right privilege to do their job? So if say in certain use cases, you would have like a general domain user account, and then you would have the domain user account with a -A. This -A account means that it has administrative permissions or certain enhanced delegated permissions for that user to do and perform certain actions. So with working with identity, we can identify who is plugged into what resources, and if they're able to access those privilege accounts or privilege resources and perform their actions. Now, this is really important when it comes to session logging, because reporting and auditing is a very key component for a lot of organizations, especially as you go on a higher scale. Compliance adherence is a big thing in today's world. So when it comes to a friction point between identity and privilege access, we want to make sure the right auditing and reporting tools are available. Some organizations actually stream their logs to what we call a SIM tool that provides the appropriate notification handling, so all the security team and the auditing team are notified immediately if there's something to be aware of. And of course, SSO terminals. This is actually a really common trend in the industry these days, where you don't really need to check out or check in the password or the actual privilege account. You can simply just do what we call a secure remote login. So the appropriate permissions are provided to user identities to access critical servers, and they're just plugged in via RDP or SSH if it's a Unix machine. Looking at identity and identity access management and identity governance, common friction points are, okay, well, if I have HR as a master or directory as a master, how do we take into account the existing policies and profile considerations in the identity solution? More often than not, it's more so integrating with that directory, ensuring that the profile attributes are mapped to the identity that's centralized. And that essentially allows us to keep that consistency with the backend policies or the group policies that are in action, but also the security policies that need to be adhered to as well. And nothing is more evident when it comes to user lifecycle management. Lifecycle management essentially is a central point of glass where we can automate the provisioning and deprovisioning of user from the source of truth. So a big pain point for a lot of customers, especially in today's day and world, is the onboarding and offboarding of users, as well as their configuration and permissions to the target resource. Lifecycle management can use group-driven or group rules that actually map the attributes, identify what access that user needs to what resources, and automatically provides that with extensive reporting attached to it. So obviously, for auditing and security purposes, everyone knows what they need to know, but the appropriate users have access to what they need to do their job, nothing more and nothing less. And we can take that into account with business process orchestration using workflows, so appropriate visibility on who has access to what, and account recovery. This is pretty useful because that can definitely reduce administrative overhead. Commonly in the past, you'd have to open a ticket, I have to reset my password, my account is unlocked. You probably have a 24-hour turnaround, maybe even longer in some instances. With most common identity solutions today, self-service account recovery is what is in action, meaning that there are certain multi-factor authentication mechanisms that are in place to verify that user, make sure they are who they are, and perform the action automatically using maybe a backend agent or an API. Between identity governance, privilege access, there's no friction points listed here. However, it is important to take into consideration with privileged resources that are being accessed, it's always important to have a governance aspect that controls that access for those privileged resources. So this is where the reporting aspect comes into play. This is where workflows can come into play, maybe even multi-tier or multi-level approvals to access those resources. So though there are not many friction points, there are certain best practices on the industry level that need to be adhered to. All right, moving on to the next. Okay, so we'll take a look at the actual deep dive of what identity access management is. And more commonly, this slide is used to understand the different areas of identity access management and how they're relevant. So let's start with Cloud Access Security Broker. So again, this is more so when the CASB, or Cloud Access Security Broker, detects policy violation, a dynamic policy creation in your identity provider to enforce MFA. So kind of like a conditional policy. You have certain conditions. Where are you logging in from? Are you a member of a certain team? Are you using a managed device? All these conditions can be taken into consideration when you're actually requesting access or trying to SSO into a specific resource. So this actually definitely allows you to cater to specific conditions and make sure that they're adhered to before you're even accepted to go through the MFA process. And once you're there, of course, you can use either multi-tier MFA or multi-layer MFA, maybe with a push notification or a passwordless feature that verifies your biometric, whether a fingerprint or face scanner on a device. As you can see by the quadrant here, McAfee, Vision, and Netscope and Microsoft are pretty much the leaders in most recent reports. All right, full lifecycle API management. So this ensures that sensitive data is not leaked via APIs by incorporating identity-centric controls. So this is really important, especially when it comes to customer identity access management use cases. APIs do everything these days, right? And we have to make sure that the APIs that we're utilizing to interact with our target resources are secure and that ensure that they have the right algorithms and the right security parameters that protect the information and data that's passing through them. So this is kind of a hard requirement. Anytime you have application or data security as a part of the conversation, the APIs need to be thoroughly tested. And I'm pretty certain that no organization or vendor will release an API that's not thoroughly assessed and evaluated. And once that validation is in place, then of course it's available to public or customers to utilize. Google Apigee is pretty big here. Salesforce, as we know, is a monster in this one. And of course, IBM's been there for quite some time. All right, and we got identity proofing. This is a good one. Identity proofing is ensuring that the right users have registered to have and have been authorized to access the right applications. So this is often utilized at the time of registration to ensure that the users are using devices that have certain verification clients on them that are tied to the user identity, to ensure that there's no inconsistency and that the behavior is consistent when they're actually being verified. Now, more often than not, CIAM situations will utilize maybe a verification client or a specific protective measure to actually store that user's data and make sure that we have a consistency on the behavior of that user. And anything that deviates from that would either deny or prompt additional verification measures. Right? Going to the next one, endpoint and mobile security, or AKA UEM. So when it comes to endpoint and mobile security, again, you want to ensure that MFA is for non-enrolled devices. And this is important to provide that seamless SSO to enrolled devices. We can also incorporate additional device context for access policy decisions as well. Typically in the workforce is where we see this use case is because they're using maybe a managed device that's assigned to them, like a managed computer or a managed cell phone, right? We want to ensure that the appropriate verification clients are sitting on those devices and they're tied to a specific user identity that is using those devices to access the target resources. So this, I can't stress enough, is very important because at the end of the day, when workstations are compromised, and that's when these malicious attackers can really access critical resources. So it is important to not only have a verification process that's done consistently, but in intervals that's done maybe every 2 weeks or every month, or whatever your security policy and your actual scope identifies as a consistent curriculum for verification and validation. All right, then we got privilege access management. So we talked a little about this earlier. Privilege access management, again, the focus really is to ensure that not only the right resources right users have access to the right resources, but the right measures or authentication or security measures are taken into account for either SSO or multi-factor authentication. So if you're going to use a specific user account that has privileges, we're going to ensure that, first of all, you are going to be verified, maybe using some sort of WebAuthn protocol or biometric verification, and that the resource that you're accessing probably already has RDP or SSH configured to it. So if it's like a server or if a critical appliance, like a application server, database server, network device, whatever it may be, we want to ensure the appropriate measures are taken so that user identity with the actual administrative permissions is accessing that right device via an SSH or an RDP or a remote service. And CyberArk is pretty key here. Delinea is pretty catching up to them. And of course, One Identity is there as well. We can also add Okta to this list in Q4 because we're going to be rolling out with our PAM solution. All right, security monitoring and operations. And of course, each identity data for security, enrich identity data for security teams to better understand cyber threats, right? We want to have revolving incidents involving identity related tasks. So what this basically means is that we want to ensure that any data that travels through is monitored, assessed, and specifically notified if anything is out of context, out of behavior, right? This is where Splunk or Logarithm come into play. These are SIEM tools that allow us to take our logs in our infrastructure or in our tools and stream them or forward them to these tools that assess every event, assess every log, and then they provide us an understanding of what's consistent and what's not consistent, and that algorithm can push out a notification to a security team or auditing team that can address it either in an automatic fashion or in a manual fashion. But regardless, the visibility and understanding of any type of vulnerabilities or risk in the environment is pivotal to any organization maintaining a high security posture. Bot detection. So this has kind of been a really strong uptrend in recent years. So this is to ensure that real traffic makes it to the identity provider for authentication and authorization. What this essentially means is that we take all the information that we can. So a data lake, or essentially mountains of data of information, and then we put it through an algorithm. So this is where kind of artificial intelligence comes into play. That algorithm assesses that data and then tells us whether or not it is a threat or not a threat based on a risk score. That risk score basically is identified based on common behaviors or behaviors that aren't consistent. So we need to utilize these functionalities so that we, especially in a customer realm where there's millions, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers using this process, the bot detection allows us to immediately identify if it's a threat or not and take the appropriate measures to cater to it. All right. And identity governance and administration. So again, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. Again, this is ensuring that the right users have the right access to the right applications. So this is taking into account, of course, what their position is. If they need to have access to that application, if they can submit that request, then maybe their manager, maybe a security member of the security team can approve that and have eyes on their access, not only for what they're accessing, but how long they're accessing it. And let's see how Okta fits into all of this. So when it comes to the identity access management, Okta has been the leader, according to Gartner and Forrester, for quite some time. And it's because we have a great feature set that gives us robust capabilities to adhere to almost every use case. So again, as you mentioned, single sign-on and making sure it's a trusted connection with the user that's trying to access the target. So the trusted connection between your identity provider and your band of applications or target resources. MFA, so not only within just certain triggers that are exercised to verify the user to prove who they are, but then we can expand that into adaptive MFA, which is basically taking into account contextual policies. So required conditions needed in order for that user to proceed to access that resource. ASA, this is ensuring that the authentication and privilege elevation pieces are in place. So what this incorporates is more so an agent that's on a critical server, but ensures that the right individuals have access to that server through our Okta Identity Access Management or identity platform. Workflows. So in Okta, we use workflows a little bit differently. So more often than not, you'd see a lot of customers creating custom scripts to adhere to specific use cases. So what workflows does, it's a no-code automation that basically uses tables, and we can sequence specific processes that plug into certain tools and resources via an API connection. And within that API connection, of course, we establish and confirm the actual relationship and the integration. But at the same time, we can automate processes a lot more simplified and a lot more easily to maintain for administrative personnel. OIG, as I mentioned earlier, this is Okta Identity Governance. So this is essentially making sure the right users have access to the right resources, but it's following an industry proven and approved security flow so that the appropriate personnel know who has access to what for the right period of time, and revoke access if they had access for too long. User lifecycle management. Again, this is automating the provisioning and deprovisioning of users from their directory source to ensure that they have access to the right resources or the right applications, and making sure that utilizing this service, the right permissions are delegated at the application level. So instead of just making sure that the users are brought in appropriately and assigned the right applications, Okta has a capability based on the integration, whether it's SAML, OIDC, or WS Fed, can go into the application and ensure the profile attributes are addressed and the user has the appropriate access in that target, which alleviates considerable amount of administrative overhead. And then we have user self-service. Again, we spoke about this a little earlier, where users can now use a recovery, a factor or multi-factor to ensure they are who they are, to maybe reset their password or unlock their account. Then we have our cloud emerging and technology security. So our Okta integration network and infrastructure as a service integration. So this essentially allows you now to go in our catalog. We have a library of over 7,600 applications that we're integrated with. And if they are in the Okta integration network, what that basically means is that we support you in the integration. We give you guidelines, step-by-step methodology, step-by-step configuration guides with screenshot on what value needs to be entered, what configurations need to be made. And that extends even further when you have infrastructure as a service, so AWS or Office 365 or Google GCP integrations. Now they don't necessarily have to be sourced at that directory. You can have them sourced at AD, plug them into Okta, assign them to maybe GCP, so now they can access Google services without being sourced at that directory. And Okta can control all that provisioning for you. Right, and application data and security. So again, IAM APIs are very important to Okta, very important to make sure that all sensitive data is secure with our APIs. But we use quite a bit of APIs on our backend as well to ensure that the appropriate integrations are in place and at the industry standard. Sign-in widget. So again, we have enhanced, and if you have our Okta Identity Engine, you'll probably notice what we have is called FastPass. FastPass allows you to seamlessly log in using WebAuthn or biometric verifications. So no password required for that service. Now, OAuth services, again, several OAuth services when it comes to YDC or OAuth 2.0 tokens. In regards to integrations, we take into account CASB integrations, as we mentioned earlier. So we ensure the right conditions are in place for users to access appropriate resources, and identity proofing and integration. So again, this is a big part of any security solution when it comes to identity, but with Okta specifically, identity proofing is a key aspect that ensures that our customers' identities and our customers are secure when they're accessing target resources. Endpoint and mobile security. We're big on MDM. We have device assurance policies to ensure that the right endpoints are registered, and that we can incorporate these in what we call authentication policies, so we can make device trust an actual condition for specific experiences for certain users. So if they're not logging in from, say, a trusted device or a company device that has been registered, they're not going to get access to that resource, period, right? So you can kind of set up your conditional policy so that it caters to your specific use case and security practices. But ideally, what this allows you to do is get a robust capability in ensuring the experience of that user caters to your internal security practices, as well as common compliance requirements that we'd see across the board in the industry. Infrastructure and network security. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have ASA. So ASA is our advanced server access. This essentially allows you to have an agent on a critical server, and using a one-time ephemeral credential, or ephemeral certificate, it allows you to now control access to specific machines. But say if it's like a Unix machine and you want partial sudo rights, or it's a Windows machine, you want to give partial administrative permissions, you can do that using ASA. So that way you can not only give access to a critical resource or a critical server, but you can control what they can do on that server. OAG, this is Okta Access Gateway. So essentially, this is a reverse proxy based virtual application. It's designed to secure web applications that don't natively support SAML or OIDC. So Access Gateway integrates with legacy applications using, say, HTTP headers and Kerberos tokens, and offers URL-based authorizations and more. So you can use Access Gateway to seamlessly integrate your legacy web-based applications with Okta's cloud single sign-on and adaptive multi-factor authentication services. And since Access Gateway is behind a firewall, it lets external users access on-prem web-based applications without the need for traditional VPNs, because Okta is that layer of protection for you. We also got security and monitoring. So deep IAM event logging and SIEM integrations, yes, indeed. We do have quite the robust reporting tools, native reporting tools that allow you to see everything. And again, as I mentioned, we are heavily adherent to compliance regulations, whether it's SOC, SOX 2, HIPAA, FedRAMP, name it. Like we have to cater to these, and that means our logs are extensive when it comes to logging. We give every piece of information on every action that takes place in our tenant. And to simplify things, we have a very consistent partnership and integration capability with our SIEM integrations, so Splunk or Sumo Logic, Logarithm, Rapid4, IBM QRadar, and XADeems, for example. But this is pretty essential when it comes to your security teams and auditing teams to ensure the appropriate flags are notified when non-characteristic or any type of behaviors that take place in your organization that aren't expected. And we got threat and vulnerability management. So this is kind of focused more so on malicious IP blocking, messaging threat detection, integration, social threat detection. So again, this is more so catered to the SIAM side, but again, the idea really is to ensure that the data is assessed automatically using our algorithm to ensure that the request isn't coming from a malicious IP. So we can identify that. We can identify specific threats. We can identify via our bot any type of I guess compromised behavior that may be taking place in the industry or on a network at large that we can take into consideration as a security measures to minimize that risk. All right, so this kind of gives you that full circle. And again, Okta really, this is only the beginning, guys. We have a few more features coming out as always. Device remote access as one of them. But again, this gives you that idea of what the modern cybersecurity program and architecture should look like, and when evaluating all aspects or three pillars of the privilege access management, identity governance, and identity access management tools. So yeah, kind of talking a little bit about that. We have IAM with SSO with MFA, as we mentioned, data governance driven by the GDPR, blockchain technology that comes to authorization and authentication. Artificial intelligence using machine learning to reduce and definitely sharpen the risk detection, but definitely reduce any type of attack surfaces or vulnerabilities. Biometrics, again, these are utilizing web authent protocols that tap into your, say, Mac fingerprint scanner or Windows Hello, or even your cell phone that has face, or your iPhone that has face detection for those services. Self-sovereign identity, again, gives you the capability of ensuring that the identity is not only managed by the user for password reset or even self-service accessibilities, but even in the end user dashboard, you have the capability of editing certain areas if they're Okta sourced accounts. Again, Okta Ventures and OpenPath and Okta, again, IAM and Internet of Things and physical access. So really, there's a few more points here that we can add into this as desktop MFA. So if there's like workstations that you want to add specific layers of verification on, you can do that using Okta. You can utilize our SDKs and again, our other agents that really seamlessly integrate with your infrastructure, but still allow you to use the features that we have sitting in our cloud service. All right, so kind of coming back to our three pillars here. Identity platform is a modern solution for managing identities of users and devices in a centralized fashion. So this enables organizations to securely authorize workforce and customer users to access their ecosystem using access management tools, programmable components, integrations, and even platform services. So today's organizations have a wide range of identity requirements, and as they expand and embrace new innovations and meet new customer demands, they need an identity solution that can grow with them, right? So as they grow, these organizations are also looking for offerings that centralize and consolidate identity, reducing the need for multiple access management, governance, and authentication products that don't necessarily talk to each other. So in short, although the concept of identity platforms is still new, generally speaking, the growth of disruptive technologies is highly personalized products and services has made a platform approach the key to effectively unifying identity management. And this is what we're trying to do with Okta. We're trying to unify it so there's one interface that you have to go to, nothing else, nothing more. You don't have to have multiple teams managing separate solutions for PAM, separate solutions for governance, separate solutions for identity. Okta gives you one interface, one tenant that gives you all three, and then you can have one team or one group of personnel managing it all to ensure that it's seamlessly done. They're all interoperable and they work together in regards to reducing risk, automating services, but at the same time giving you visibility on your security, enhancing that security posture. And one there a bit. And as a promise, we do have a pretty strong relationship with AWS. AWS is a key partnership that we have at Okta. And you know what? We're hosted in AWS. We're structured on a multi-cell architecture that allows us to promise our customers an SLA of 99.99%. Okta is a global company, right? And we have customers across APAC or EMEA, North America, South America. So we can't have any planned downtime when it comes to patches and upgrades. AWS allows us to simply redirect that traffic and still maintain that SLA of 99.99%. Also, we have our architecture on zero trust, meaning we want the identity of the user to be the new network perimeter. And that essentially gets rid of that traditional network perimeter because, again, once there's a breach within that network perimeter, everything defined in that network perimeter is now considered exposed and vulnerable. So using the user's identity as a new network perimeter removes that vulnerability, removes that attack surface, and consequently increases your security posture and efficiency for your organization as a whole. And kind of talking a little bit about where Okta sits right now. We are a leader in identity, as I mentioned. We have over 17,000 plus customers. I think the number is way higher now. And we have our employee and internal workforce rate is growing and it's focused on identity, over 6,000. We have 19 offices in 14 countries. Again, 1.9 billion in revenue, and that's just last year. I'm pretty sure that's going up this year. So as we're coming out with OIG and our governance solution and our privilege access management solution, we can only expect these numbers to grow. And we were expecting that Gartner and Forrester definitely give some reports in our efficiency and how we can definitely have an impact. And just taking a look at some of their quadrants here, we can see that in Gartner's report, we are top in the identity, in Forrester's as well. So the idea really is that, we want to maintain that no doubt, but at the same time, we want to ensure that any new features or any new services that we provide to our customers is taking with the diligence and the professionalism and expertise that our engineers bring to the table day in, day out, and to make sure that we have the best solution out there that works efficiently with the least amount of issues. And yeah, 6 years of leadership. There's a reason why we do this. We're not just making a solution that's out there for customers to use. We're constantly reevaluating what we're offering and how we can better it. We love to get feedback from our customers to understand, what their pain points are, how we can make our solution better. And, we were committed to expanding on that, developing our feature set so that it stays with the trend, if not exceeds the trend that is currently at the industry. But again, we took pride in being leaders in execution when it comes to new services and kind of paving the road as we proceed further in the digital age. And back over to you, David. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. We're gonna pivot here just a little bit. Great presentation, though. Thank you so much for doing that, Aries.
Yeah, no problem.
We're now going to talk a little bit about how CDW can help you on your identity access management journey. And before we do, I'm just going to call out a little bit on our 2023 security study. So we do a security study every year. It is a Canadian-based study where we interview with IDC Canadian organizations to really get an understanding of where where they are in their security journey within Canada and the unique risks within the Canadian landscape. And specifically, there were a number of findings from that study, but one of the core findings that came out of that study related to zero trust. And specifically, and in no small part because of the rapid transition to the cloud and to a remote workforce that happened as a result of COVID, is that the zero trust is really shifted in many organizations' minds away from what was traditionally thought of zero trust, which was at the network level, and has been much more identity focused. To the point of actually being somewhat myopic and almost exclusively focused on identity and access management and forgetting some of the core tenets. And one of those key core tenets is the assumption of a breach. So identity is really kind of now in many customers' minds taken we'll call it the top position as being kind of key to their zero trust journey in the cloud. Now that on the surface seems like maybe like a good thing, a lot more focus on identity and access management. But what's interesting is within the data, what was found is in spite of that understanding that identity is kind of one of the key tenets of zero trust, only 39% of organizations actually had a unified directory for identity management and processes built around that. Which means that within the cloud for many organizations, or between the cloud and on-prem, identity is often fragmented. And that significantly increases risk and actually reduces the ability for organizations to implement a true zero trust posture. So out of that study came a number of recommendations, and along the identity and access management side of things, really the understanding that if you're going to do a zero trust, if you're going to operationalize it, you need to focus on a couple of key things. And one of those things, again, is that assumption of a breach, assuming that all access requests and effectively all usage may in fact be malicious. But more specifically, organizations need to strive to a continuous authorization and honestly authentication and authorization model, a model where in spite of having maybe an identity and maybe having authenticated once, that it is a continual process to contain that risk. And clearly one of the ways in which you can do that is leveraging some of the powerful technologies and capabilities that exist in the Okta platform. It's one of the key drivers. If you're going to go down that journey, you're going to go down this, operationalizing zero trust. Clearly, Okta's platform of capabilities is a way in which you can do that. Now, specifically around CDW, how can we help? So how can we help you on this journey? We engage our customers and simplify as best as we can an approach to cybersecurity. And we break it down really into three key pillars, which we refer to as prepare, defend, and respond. When we look at the prepare pillar, we're really focused on helping our customers understand their organization. So whether that is helping them build out a cybersecurity strategy, program plan, or identifying their core business risks or even technological risks, and building out a plan and roadmaps to mitigate those risks, to implement the controls to mitigate those risks, whether those controls are technical or administrative, right? People, processes, and technology. When we look at the defense pillar, once we've got customers understanding their strategy and having a roadmap, really the defend for us is helping customers implement those cybersecurity controls. And again, those can be process controls, people controls, or technical controls, often in the form of common security platforms. And our role there is to help our customers implement them according to best practices. And again, cybersecurity is a journey. And when you're implementing those controls, it's not going to be a kind of all one and done, set it and forget it kind of style. It is a continuous journey. So we're there to help our customers continuously improve their security posture. And if that's implementing from a greenfield implementation of a particular technology or process, or if it's helping them tweak and align to best practices or reviewing what they've already got in place, that's really what's covered off in our defend pillar. And last but not least is the respond pillar. And really that's helping organizations to build the practices so that they can really operationalize those cybersecurity controls, monitor, detect, and then respond to potential breaches. This also would include for us, if organizations aren't capable, we have managed services that allow us to do a lot of the management, the 24/7 investigation and remediation if they can't do that, but also helping organizations build those processes to ensure that they can effectively respond to incidents, including helping them build incident response plans, and as well as security control testing, right, which is often referred to as penetration testing. So not just helping customers implement those controls and be able to respond to breaches, but helping customers understand whether or not those controls are properly implemented, and if there's any gaps, and then helping them to close the gaps. And this looks like a kind of, a 1, 2, 3 kind of approach where it's very linear, but it's actually cyclical and iterative. And that is how we work with our customers. Now we break our cybersecurity offerings and our customers into 5 kind of categories. We refer to this as sort of the wheel of security. On the product side, if you need help identifying a particular security control and it's a technical control, we have great partnerships. Obviously, Okta is one of our top partnerships. We're there to help you identify what you need and right size for your organization and for your needs, and then help you grow that over time. But more importantly, on the risk advisory services, which is more that defense side, that's where we're coming in and helping organizations with that kind of program planning, with those risk assessments, with penetration testing. Our professional services area is really about those, as I said, those technical control implementations, which I'll talk about in a second. And then, of course, we offer managed security services as well, where we can operationalize and then take management of your security practice, whether it's a single technology control that you need assistance with monitoring, or if it's a full managed SOC kind of situation. And then last but not least, we also offer consulting services. It is either short-term or long-term engagements, often in the form of staff augmentation. We have a ready vetted bench of individuals, about 120 right now, pre-vetted, many with top security clearance, and very skilled and deeply skilled in specific, sometimes niche areas that can assist you kind of as you're going through your cybersecurity journey. So as it relates specifically to the Identity Access Management security offerings, our risk advisory services can certainly help you if you need to do an identity access management risk assessment, either on its own or as part of as a broader cybersecurity program strategy, or even in a specific targeted engagement, helping you build out an identity access management strategy. So maybe you've already got a program plan, you've identified that identity access management is a key area, and now you want to build a strategy and roadmap behind that. Again, that's much more on the prepare side. Our risk advisory services can certainly help out. And then for the professional services side of things, absolutely we can assist either directly or through our large partnerships with doing Okta deployments, whether that is greenfield or if it's making adjustments. Maybe you're wanting to add a capability into your current Okta deployment. We can certainly help there. And then last but not least, as we talked about, it's those consulting services. Sometimes those are going to be project based, so it might be you want somebody for a key identity access management initiative. We can help source that for you, or it might be a shorter long-term staff augmentation where you want somebody to actually run your identity access management program. We can absolutely help source that with sort of top skilled individuals. Last but not least, one of the benefits that you get with working with CDW is access to a bench of security solution architects. Now, these architects are effectively value-add services. There's no charge to leverage them. You all you have to do is reach out to your account executive and engage. And really the idea behind having these security architects is to help organizations plan and map out their security controls, if you would, according to the plan that they have built, right? So again, as we talk about the risk advisory services can help build out that plan and that roadmap. The solution architects are really there to now help you identify from a technical control perspective what products are best going to fit those control requirements, and then help you to choose, and then if necessary, necessary, scope out and build out the design for the implementation. And, if you need assistance, then turn that over to professional services. So it is really a value add. It's a free service. It doesn't cost anything. You just need to pick up the phone and call. It's a great resource to use if you have questions about a particular technology or maybe about a particular process, or even, hey, what's going on in the industry? What are you seeing other customers doing in a particular vertical or maybe within a particular market segment? They're there certainly to assist you. So that's how CDW can really offer assistance for you on your journey down the identity access management path and beyond. So folks, we're at 10:54. That really brings us to the end of the presentation. We've got about 6 minutes, which is great. We moved quicker than I think I thought we would, which is fantastic. So if you do have any questions, I can't actually see the chat, Ray. I don't know if you've been watching the chat there, but I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here for a second and see if I can take a look if there's any questions in the chat there. I don't actually see any. Okay, so if you do have any questions, by all means, actually, I take that back. I do see some questions in the chat. Oh, no. Let me just bring it up here a little bit bigger so I can actually read these questions. It doesn't look like there's only a few. Nope, there's no, those are just comments. Okay, so no questions right now. If you do have any questions, I'll be staying on the line for about 5 more minutes or so you can certainly post them in there if you want to ask some questions. If you don't have any questions right now, but maybe you have some questions in the future, reach out to your account representative at CDW. They'll forward those questions on into myself and the CDW technical team, and we can certainly strive to answer them. All righty. So I'll stay on the line here again for another